Good morning, everybody. We've got 35 participants so far, but we're expecting very close to, or at least very close to 100 have booked. We normally expect about a third of people to be no-shows on the day because they obviously have access to the recording later. Maybe I'll just give it another minute or two for more people to arrive. In the meantime, hello. I can see some people that's names I recognize on the screen. So, Marta, you're there, I see.
Yes,
How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good, good. And Kush, how are you?
Very good, thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good. We'll do introductions later when we've had our hour's worth with Maria. Francesca, I can see your name. How are you?
Hi, good morning. Very well, thanks. Morning to everyone.
Good, good. Who else have got? Valerie, I can see you're on.
Good morning.
How are you? You're muted, I think. Are you?
Good morning.
Are
Very
you
nice
well?
to join. I'm unmuted now. Thank you.
Okay, good. We've got only 44 out of our near 100, but I think we can probably start. We're delighted to have Maria Arpa speaking to us again. It's a long time since I've seen her, and even longer since she previously was one of our speakers. I recommended that everybody Googles her because there's so much to say about her. But I did say in one of my emails that I've described her in the past as a cross between a tornado and a hurricane, or vice versa. I'm sure she'll live up to that reputation. So, Maria, can I pass over to you? And you're muted still.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, I can, certainly.
Okay, thank you. So, well, welcome. It's interesting to see so many faces and some people that I know, of course, and some people that I don't know. And I really wanted to give a talk about the journey of the last 30 years and really bringing this work into prisons. What I thought I'd do is just kind of go from a sort of chronological and ideas and the things that we've done up to where we are now, and then open it up for questions reasonably early so that it's more of an interactive discussion rather than me just talking at you for an hour. And I think the way it works is you just do the raised hand, or you could put something in the chat, but I think Dave takes care of that for me, so he'll sort of say, oh, somebody wants to say something. So with that, I shall begin. So I was busy running an advertising agency in the 90s and making a decent living. And suddenly, over a few years, I started to think, this is very meaningless. It's very empty. All my clients are much younger than me. This is not where I want to be in the world, all those kinds of questions. I was questioning my parenting, I was questioning a lot of things in my life. And then at the same time, all at the same time, that's where the word suddenly comes in, I discovered community mediation and became a neighbour mediator in my local area in the London Borough of Brent as a volunteer. I discovered Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to say that I learned my NVC directly from Marshall. And I also became a Reiki master. I started to get into energy practices. So I was busy doing neighbour disputes, and you know, they really are the coalface of this work, because you're working on housing estates with people in a lot of poverty, who don't want to see you. They're not interested. They're not paying for it. They're usually sent by the housing association. And you can tell people it's voluntary as much as you like, but when people live in social deprivation, they believe that anything that that anyone sort of higher up the food chain is an instruction. And then it's like event organising for one of the worst events you could ever do. You've got to get the participants there who don't want to be there. You've got to hire some rooms or find some rooms to do it in. We used to do it all face-to-face back then. You've got to do the home visits. And then you might get a no-show, and then you're dealing with a participant. You're dealing with a participant who's sitting there waiting for the other one to show up and trying to figure out how not to make that situation worse. So I started doing that work and started to think there has to be a better way, because in a lot of neighbour mediation, it always presents as noise. 90% of cases present as noise, although that's just what it presents as. Underneath that, you're going to get into lots of lifestyle differences, lots of different religious, lots of racism, lots of disagreement about how to bring up children. There's going to be lots of disagreements. And I thought, well, if we're putting all that effort to get a few people round a table that really don't want to be there, and all we do is try and sort out the noise, the rubbish, the children, the parking, if you've got any sense of this work, you can put any group of people in a room and get them to agree something over 2 or 3 hours, and pat yourself on the back, and everyone pats themselves on the back, and you say, what a great job you did. And I don't know where it sits now, but back then in housing, a successful case was if it didn't come back to the housing officer for 6 months. And I just thought, what a waste of energy, and what a missed opportunity to try and get people to connect as humans and as neighbours. And that was really the original quest, was how do we help the people to connect and see beyond the noise, the rubbish, to stop otherising. And if I was being brutal about it, how to help people not shit on their own doorsteps. So with the nonviolent communication, the mediation skills I'd learned, and the energy work, the energy healing work, I started to decide that there was a very powerful cocktail that could transform the way we do this work. Anyway, at the same time, I'd moved into Kensal Rise in northwest London, and in 2003 a 7-year-old girl was fatally shot by a drug dealer around the corner on the Harrow Road, not far from where I live. And I'm bringing up pre-teens, teenagers, and I'm thinking, God, this is terrible. So what happened was the police arrested somebody, as the police always do. If you can look back at all sorts of cases, and you can see that when there's something that makes national headlines, the police need to be seen to act. So they will arrest anyone. And what they did was they took out a local drug dealer, and that created a turf war. So between 2004, 2005, I mean, you can still find press about it online. There were drive-by shootings almost every single day, because this turf war had opened up, because there was a vacuum for this space. And, at 65, would I do this again? Probably not. But at the time, a little knowledge can be a dangerous thing, can't it? So I decided that I could go out onto the streets and start talking to people. So I literally stood on the street, and of course it's never as good as you make it out to be, because most people cross the road and think you're crazy. But, you know, if you stand there long enough and you try to talk to people long enough, somebody will engage and somebody will talk to you. And so,
Maria, sorry to interrupt at the moment. We're not getting your picture. We're getting somebody else's. So I'm just wondering if Michael can give you priority as the speaker.
Oh, I see. Right. Okay.
Bear with me a second.
Well, someone can see me.
Oh,
I
right.
can.
Oh, okay then. Well, in that case, carry on. Sorry, my apologies. For some reason, I've got somebody else on screen.
Dave, I can see Maria perfectly and hear her
Okay,
too.
my apologies then. Okay, carry on.
Great, thank you. So all roads led to Harlesden and a very particular nightclub in Harlesden, and a man who sadly died during COVID called Collar Williams. And he thought I was undercover police. So he was absolutely sure he didn't want to talk to me. He used to swear at me and throw me out of his club when I used to go try to talk to him. And, you know, this is definitely one of the landmarks of the work, was just finding it in myself not to be offended, finding it in myself to know that he was somebody that I wanted to engage with, and just keep going with compassion, keep talking to him. And it took 18 months to build any trust with him. And then, as luck would have it, something happened in the area, and he said, oh, well, if for you to have said that, you can't be the police, we can deal. And I was so sure that I wanted to train this guy. So we had many conversations, and I said, look, I want to train you in this work because you're in it. I'm just on the periphery of it. I'm just, you know, experiencing the drive-by shootings from a member of the public point of view. And he said, for every hour I spend having to learn your stuff, you have to spend the same amount of time following me and seeing what I have to put up with in my world. So I actually spent 2 years shadowing him, going to the club, watching gang sit downs, trying to, you know, not make myself known or whatever, taking a back seat. There was a whole conversation where he said to me, Maria, you're going to come to these places and do not go, hi, I'm Maria. Just sit there quietly, say absolutely nothing, and people are going to stare at you, and then they're going to look at me, and I'm going to go, she's cool. And then he said, and then maybe when they've seen you 4 or 5 times, they'll like go like that to you, and you can go like that back. And bit by bit, trust was built. And I used to talk about, you know, when you get that phone call that goes, Maria, they're going to kill each other, can you come up here now? And what I talk about that is, it isn't what you do when you get that phone call. And if you've all trained as mediators and you've got some experience, you'll know exactly what to do. What matters is the 18 months of trust building in which you are the person that gets that call. That's what matters. So he and I got up to all sorts. We actually, eventually we had the police and him co-mediating on the streets whenever there was a stop and search or an arrest. There's so much to say about that time, and if anyone's really interested in the depth of the work that we did together, we did police community dialogue in small private circles. You know, these things will never go down on record anywhere. But it was an amazing time. And someone said, you need to take this work into prisons. And I was like, okay, well, I've got no connections. I don't know much about prisons. And someone I know very well and care very deeply about said, well, I can get you into Wandsworth prison through chaplaincy. And we did a pilot. And so I'll talk about the prison project and you know, the years we've put into that and where we've got to. But again, I went into the prison. I'd never been in a prison, but all I see are human beings. That's all I see. Wherever I go, I'm only interested in meeting the human being behind the label, the judgment, the diagnosis, the mask, you know, whatever it is. There's a human, there's a soul, and a beating heart. So I went into prison not knowing what to expect. And for the first time, I think, in prison history, the pilot, so I was supposed to be training what prisoners who were violence reduction reps. So, and what was interesting was they'd received no training whatsoever. And they were prisoners who were supposed to interrupt and disrupt violence. But of course, with no training, they were using bullying to stop bullying because they didn't know anything else. So I had this training group. I had 8 men who are what are known as mains prisoners, and 8 men from the vulnerable prisoners unit who are, you know, known as sex offenders, in the same room. That had never been done, because I had no idea what was going on. I was in this room with no windows, and 8 men came in from one door here, and they were all sort of very large characters, and 8 men came in from another door, and they sat either side of the rooms staring at each other. And over a few weeks, you know, I went in and said, look, I've been asked to bring this work into prison. You'll know better than me whether I'm onto something. So what I want to do is I want to show you this, and I want you to tell me if you think it's any good. And that's how it unfolded. So we had a prison officer in the training, but as I said, no one's allowed to observe. Anyone in the room has to participate. And so the prison officer participated with everyone else, just like everyone else. And again, you know, it's a deep story. One of the things that we ended up doing, just to give you one example, is we had a guy who's a lifer. He was at the beginning of a life sentence, and he came to the first 2 sessions, and then he missed the rest, and he came for the last 2 because I mean, you'd think if you're working in a prison, you've got a captive audience, but he couldn't get off the wing because his name wasn't on the list. So I said to him, you know, you've missed so much of this. I don't really know how I can catch you up. But if you're willing to be the subject, then, you know, maybe you could get a healing experience from this. So he spoke about how he had murdered his wife, and he was at the beginning of, he'd been in and out of prison, and he spoke about that he'd just come to terms with the fact that he'd murdered his wife. He couldn't believe that he'd done this. You know, how have I murdered my wife? She was the one person that stood by me. I deserve to be in prison. I'm not going to appeal. You know, I'm a hopeless case. And I've also come into prison and started taking drugs again. And, you know, pretty much my life is over. And I said, okay, so what we'll do is we'll pick somebody to play the part of you that's taking drugs, that thinks life is over, that killed your wife. You know, pick someone in the group to play that person, and pick somebody else in the group to play the part of you that wants to flourish, the part of you that says, I need to get off drugs, I need to, you know, I need to change my life. And then pick somebody else to play your inner mediator. So we're looking at the dark, the light, and the inner moderator, the inner mediator. And he sat and watched all of his internal noise, everything. He sat and watched that being mediated. He got so much healing from that. It was absolutely, it was a marvel. And what was wonderful was for all the other guys as well, everyone was watching, you know, there, but for the grace of God go I. So at the end of that, the guys said, you know, you should take this on the streets. You know, we can give you the names. We can, you know, this is what's needed out there. And I was already doing some gang work, but there wasn't any take up by the system. And actually, by the time we finished the course, which had not been advertised, the prison officer who'd arranged it, just by word of mouth, had 57 applications on her desk from prisoners saying, I want to do this work. Unfortunately, there was some trouble at Wandsworth and Brixton, and the whole thing got shut down, and governors changed. It was a whole mess that went on in the prison system. A new governor came in and was definitely not interested in this work. So I sat there going, this is kind of crazy. We've got something that definitely has an effect, and I can't get any buy-in, and I certainly can't get any funding. So it took me from 2009. Oh, and the other thing is I am still in touch with one person who went through his sentence. He served a life sentence, and I am still in touch with him. He completed his sentence. I've followed him around a couple of prisons. He's out. He's having a second bite at the cherry. And he has actually, partly he mentors me and I mentor him. It's an absolutely amazing relationship for a man with lived experience. So it took till 2012 to get some funding, and we went into a prison called Alt Course. I was supposed to go into Wormwood Scrubs, which is on my doorstep, but the gatekeepers were just not so keen on a new initiative. And I ended up calling the friend that had got me into Wandsworth and saying, I've got a problem, I've got this funding, I'm not making any traction with Wormwood Scrubs, you know, can you help? And she said, you know how life works. She said, oh, I've got someone coming for dinner who's a chaplain in a prison in Liverpool. Would you like to meet him? And that has been the beginning of an amazing, absolutely amazing friendship, peer work, you know, project working. And so he got me in to meet his governor up in Liverpool, and I thought, my God, I'm going to be travelling backwards and forwards to Liverpool, but it was amazing. And what we did was we started training prisoners as mediators. I think we ran 4 or 5 cohorts, and I remember in one mop-up at the end of a training, one guy saying, I never thought that I'd be sitting in a training about learning about having a conversation about having a conversation. One person said, I think I used to quote this a lot because it was so shocking. And what does it say about our education system when you've got a man who says, I never knew you could stop an argument through talking? I mean, that's a sad indictment of our society. I never knew you could stop an argument through talking. We had a 21-year-old ex-drug dealer who really was so enthralled by this stuff. He said to me, I've got two, I work, he's a kitchen porter. He said, I'm in the kitchen, I'm kitchen porter, and we've got this serious Liverpudlian gang member working in the kitchen. And he said, and now this other gang member has arrived in the prison and he too has got a job in the kitchen. And he said, this is seriously going to kick off. It's going to kick off. And he said to me, Miss, do you think I could mediate it? Because I'm there with my bucket and mop and I'm hearing what's going on. And I said to him, I won't use his name. I said to him, listen, if you only do what I showed you and nothing else, you can't make it worse. And this wonderful story where he's got his mop and his bucket in the kitchen and he hears these two having a crack at each other, and he in this absolutely clumsy way, as it was reported back to me, he said, hey, listen guys, listen, I've been doing this mediation thingy, can I try it on you? And And they looked at him as if he was crazy. He said, no, seriously, tell me what the problem is. And he looks at one of them, and the guy says some stuff or whatever. And he says, all right. And he turns to the other guy and he says, tell me what the problem is. And the second guy goes, no, man, I just stopped smoking. I just stopped smoking a couple of weeks ago. So I'm completely on edge. And I'm just like in a state. And the first guy turns to the second guy, grabs his hand and says, oh, no, you stopped smoking. I know what that's like. That's really terrible. Well, that explains why you're in such a bad mood. And while they didn't come to any fantastic agreement, they both agreed to do their time and stay away from each other. And the prison went mad for this because they were all preparing for something. So loads of little things like that. We had a guy, I'd sat in a meeting that we had after training and said, look, I've got this vision that we would, when people come into prison, there would be part of induction would be saying, we don't fight, we don't use violence, we use the dialogue roadmap, which is the tool I've created. We use the dialogue roadmap and we talk about our issues. And I didn't think that guys would take it to heart. So two of the guys on one of the wings, there's always a problem in prison. There's often lots of conflict and sparky stuff goes on in the queue for meals because you fill out your meal sheet and then inevitably they've run out of the one you ordered or somebody else changes their mind or whatever. And there's a lot of kind of fairness buttons that go off. So some new guy arrived on the wing. He was throwing his weight around a little bit in the dinner queue. And the two guys went up to him and said, listen, mate, we don't do this on this wing. We talk about our issues. So lots of sort of proof. But then I realized that actually I'm training all these guys. They're using it where they can, but there's not a proper system for it. It hasn't been integrated into the prison system. And we went to a lot of prisons. We went to Altcourse, Liverpool, Brixton, Hunter Combe, Oakwood. And I kept seeing that after a while it would just tail off because either the person that was in charge of the project would leave or priorities would change. So I stubbornly stuck my foot down in 2015 and said, I'm never going into another prison unless the senior leadership team, the governor, has bought into this and says we have to change the system to accommodate this way of doing things. And with my wonderful chaplain, Martin, moved to Dartmoor. So in 2016, I spent 9 months negotiating with the governor and saying, are you sure you want this? Are you sure you want me? Are you sure you can cope with what I'm bringing? Because it will change the way things are done. And finally, this whole senior management team said yes. And we began work 2016, I think it was, or 2017. And we started by training 8 prisoners and 8 prison officers in the same training, a bit like when I did the training in Wandsworth, 2 completely different populations sitting there going, oh, how's this going to work then? But the prison officers that were trained were people that would normally be resistant to this type of thing. The governor was really wise. She said, let's get a few of the people that would be resistant and see what they say at the end of it. And they said, this is a game changer. So we were game on. We had the first officer who ended up being the coordinator for the project, and the first couple of guys that wanted to actually mediate in the prison. They were given a room with a leaky roof. So if it rained, they had to call off the mediation because the water would come pouring in. And then eventually the guys said, look, we really want to do this, but we have to be in work or education, and this isn't a job, and we can't give up our association time to do it. So I went back to the governor and we agreed to make it a job. So it became, I mean, obviously we're just talking prison wages, but it did become the highest paid job in the prison and therefore very sought after. And bit by bit over the course of we got things wrong, we made mistakes, we learned as we went. We ended up with, at one point we had 25 guys trained up, and that's too many. We've now learned that that's too many because I can't put someone full-time in the prison to manage all their relationships. So a kind of optimum number is about 12. And they run a service in the prison. So Dartmoor closed and we've had to move our project to Portland. And we're also about to go into another prison called the Verne, and I've got some other conversations going. So what the guys do, I'll cut to the chase. What I train guys to do is we have a team of facilitators. They do one-to-ones using the dialogue roadmap to work with people who are struggling in the system, to try and catch things before they escalate. And we offer 6 sessions. The guys work in pairs. They offer 6 sessions. Everything that is said is confidential, apart from if they say, and we tell them this beforehand, don't tell us that you have harmed yourself or someone else, or you intend to harm someone else or yourself, because we can't keep that confidential. But other than that, everything is confidential. You get 6 sessions and then a review. They also mediate in the prison, sometimes under the radar, because you may have things like debt problems in prison. I'm seeing the hands go up, so I'll just get to the end of this and then Dave. Sometimes officially. So we had some guys, it was really interesting, 2 guys in prison who were of Muslim faith, but they'd fallen out with each other, so they now weren't allowed to go to Friday prayers together. And it was a silly argument, and they said they wanted to sort of shake hands. And I had some newly trained guys who was, right, we want you to come and mediate this. And the 2 guys, the prison officers said, well, we want you to get these guys in the room and have them shake hands and, you know, and apologise to each other so it's all over. I was so proud of my guys. They went, that's not our process. If you just want someone to get people to shake hands, that's not what we do. We do one-to-ones with each participant, and we check that it's safe, and we go deeper into the conflict. So if you want that service, that's what we'll provide for you. I was so proud of them. So they mediate sort of above the radar, below the radar, pre and post adjudication, when officers ask for it. I mean, we had one officer in Dartmoor who was known for being very brutal and hating this work. And yet one day he had a prisoner in a cell who was kicking off, and he actually went over and found one of our guys and said, can you come and do that thing before I beat the shit out of this guy? What a change, what a transformation. And then they also run circle dialogues. So there are some things that are common to everybody. You know, you might have a family member that dies while you're in prison. You're not allowed to go to the funeral. You know, you feel your relationship with your children falling down, you know, all sorts of topics in which we can bring people into circle dialogue. And then I've created something called the Self-Reflection Pack, which is a 3 to 6 month transformational process run by 2 prisoner facilitators with somebody who's hit rock bottom and there's nowhere else to go but to come back up again. And we've put, I'd say over the years, around 12 to 20 people through the Self-Reflection Pack. It's a very intense piece of work and transformed lives. And the real gold standard is when we take someone who's you know, been an addict. We had someone who'd been an addict since he was 8 years of age, and, you know, spent most of his life in prison, who hit that rock bottom, went through the self-reflection pack, and then became a facilitator himself. We had 2 or 3 people that have done that. And so these guys, they run a service within the prison. They have an office, they have a workplace, they have rooms to do one-to-ones. The prison is aware of this, and they run their own team. So they take turns to chair their group. You know, they have additional roles like running the rota, keeping tabs on the casework. And then I have a team of volunteers that go in and do their well-being, and I do their ongoing training. It's really quite a marvellous and wonderful project, and we fund it ourselves. I decided a long time ago that if I take money from the system, it has control of what we do. Again, that's a deeper story. So the charity that I set up, the Centre for Peaceful Solutions, you'll notice the initials are the CPS by design. We have 7 charity shops, and we fund the work through the 7 charity shops, which limits us. So we're looking to expand, but also means that I can speak truth to power, and I'm not scared of my funding being pulled. So, I mean, there's so much more to say. We could be here for 2 weeks. I love to tell you a bit more about the training that I do, but I think there are some hands raised and some questions. So is that, Dave, can I give it to you?
Yes, that's great. Thank you, Maria. A couple of hands raised so far. Firstly, Francesca Santoro, please.
Hi, thank you very much. And Maria, that's been so fascinating. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and experience with us. I've got a couple of questions, if that's okay. The first one is about trust building and communication. What can you tell us about that in this particular context? And the second question that I have is, I'm in the space that you were when you left your job in advertising. And I'm thinking, well, I'm jumping off in January to become a full-time mediator, as well as doing other things. But what advice could you give to me and anyone else who's in that similar position?
Fantastic. So in terms of trust building, the one thing that I will always say is there is no marketing, there is no funding, there is no shortcut to building trust with people. It takes as long as it takes. The more authentic I am, the more I'm open, the more people can see into me, the quicker that works. You can only love another human being to the extent that you love yourself. So the work is always in here. And what keeps me safe is proving, when you demonstrate that you do not have an agenda for another human being. I am not here to tell you that I can show you the good life or a better way of being. If you want to kill that person, if you want to take those actions, I am not here to stop you. I'm only here to open up a train of thought, or to open up something in your heart that's been locked, so that you can see greater possibilities and consequences for down the line. And that for me is the whole thing. Never have an agenda for another human being. If you go walk into a mediation, you know, when you first start mediating, you want your mediations to succeed. And you quickly learn that actually then you're putting something into the session that didn't ought to be there. It's their lives, it's their decision. What they want to do is up to them. What I can do is be the best I can be, both as a human being in my heart space, so what I talk about now, which might be a bit too woo-woo for this audience, but what I talk about is my work is concentrating on vibrating at the frequency of love. That's my work. And then the other question you asked, Francesca, was getting started. So this isn't like being a plumber, where you go and do your gas certification, you run an ad in the local paper and everyone's boiler's going to break down sooner or later. It isn't like that. You mediate your way into work. It's all about how you present yourself, how you talk about what you do, and how you build your confidence and competency so that people can smell it on you when you walk in the room.
Okay.
And then I'd love to talk to you about our 1 year training, which I'll mention before we finish today for anyone that's interested. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's beautiful. What you said about vibrance, the frequency of love, actually, that does resonate with me. So
Thank
not
you.
too woo-woo.
Thank
you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks, Maria. We've got one other hand up at the moment. Roger Levitt, please.
Hello, Roger.
Hello, great to see you. Lovely to see you as smiling and well and energetic as ever, since many years ago.
Yeah.
So I've watched with amazement over the years as Maria has built up her practice. And my question for you, Maria, is how long do you think you can do it, and how long do you want to do it?
What, continuing?
Continuing. Because it's so demanding, it's so so challenging.
Yeah.
Physically as well as mentally.
So I don't do casework anymore. That's not a good use of my time. I train people, whether that's in a prison and working with a community of women in southern Spain, whether that's the 1 year training that we deliver. My resources are better used to put this work out in the world through more people. So we have now, over the years, we've gathered a little sort of tribe, if you like, of people that have trained. And then when work comes in, I supervise people to do the work. So we can put people on a case. I mean, we've got our first project with the NHS at the moment. Obviously, I can't talk about it. And, what I'm doing is I'm supervising our people who've been through our training to do this work. I can't imagine. It's funny because my son, I've got 4 grandchildren, son and a daughter, and they've both used the R word, retire, at me, and I say at me, and I don't imagine stopping doing what I'm doing anytime soon. Would I like a bit more time for the grandchildren? Of course, they live overseas. I've got one lot in Madrid and one lot in New York. So I'm carving out more time for that, for them. But I don't see myself stopping until someone tells me that I'm over the hill, and I don't think I'm there yet.
Thanks, Maria. And we have got one new hand up. So if we could just take this one, and then we can pass back to you.
Mm-hmm.
Athanta Gibson.
Oksana, yeah. Hi, good morning. Maria, that was really inspirational. And I do a lot of work in the racism space. And it's not always easy because you have to often get the parties to actually accept that there is some racism or racist behavior that's not acceptable. So your neutrality in those types of cases can waive. I was just wondering, have you ever felt defeated by parties who didn't want to do the work you so wanted to do, or didn't believe in themselves to be who they were, to trust in the work that you wanted to do with them?
That's such a lovely question. Thank you. So firstly, I don't believe in neutrality. There's no such thing. It doesn't exist. And I don't even believe in impartial. I believe in multi-partial. And when I let go of all of that, what I say is the work only stops when I run out of resources. So it's never the people, it's never anyone else. It's my choice to put more resource in or not. So it's not defeat. It's just a choice. So when we first tested the dialogue roadmap, you know, one of the big myths of mediation is this whole 8 out of 10 cases settle when people come to a joint meeting, which is absolutely true. But what nobody really talks about is less than 25% of what could be a case ever gets to a joint meeting. And so what we did was we said, well, what if we just keep doing one-to-ones with people until they're ready? And we did an experiment for a year in 2009, I think it was. And over 50 cases, we brought 90% to the table by just continuing to work, just continuing. So for me, when I'm doing my one-to-one, the only goal is to get the next meeting. The only goal is that they say, I will talk to you again. Until such time as a person can understand. So I understand that we use these labels like racism and sexism and all the rest of it, but actually at the end of the day, what I want to do is help people to see past all of that into humans, that we're all on this planet together, and that the fact that, you see, you can hate anybody you like, but they're not going away. And actually, the more that you hate people or a group of people, they're still renting space. They're renting space in here, even when you have nothing to do with them. So, I mean, there's a lot to be said about this, but for me, it's not about defeat. It's only about at what point do I say my resources are better deployed somewhere else, because I can't change the world, and I can't change everyone, and it's not my job to change everyone. So I hope that's a kind of good enough answer, because I see lots of other hands going up.
Yeah, do you want to carry on with
yeah, let's carry on questions, because the questions are really helpful to draw out more of the work.
Okay then. Next one I've got then on my screen is Ilan Bass, please.
Thanks, Dave, and thank you, Maria, for a wonderful presentation. Really interesting to hear about your experience. So I've been a community mediator since 2018. Mostly actually in the Brighton and Hove area, although I'm a Londoner originally, and I've relocated to Tokyo in the last few months as a Rotary Peace Fellow. So I'm interested, you mentioned community mediation earlier, and I was really interested to hear your perspective on how it is that we might do better at articulating the value proposition of community mediation, so that it isn't always delivered as a charity service for communities, even though, of course, I think myself and many of us here would agree that the value is huge for communities. And just finally, the reason why I ask that is because I'm involved with Mediators Beyond Borders International to try to create a network of community mediation organizations across Europe to emphasize the value of it and to get community mediators more work and more paid work. So thank you, and really interested to hear your perspective on that.
So thank you. What a really great question, and actually probably one that I can only give you a superficial answer to in this time, but I'd be more than happy to have a longer conversation with you, because this is dear to my heart. So in 2010, when our funding ended, and I said that I would never do community, as in neighbour work, as a charitable thing, that the housing associations needed to pay for it as like any other commercial proposition, because most social housing is totally inadequate, and what we can't do is them use charitable work and resources to prop up a terrible system. If you've got housing that's pretty much made of cardboard, telling people that they need to mediate because they can hear each other snoring, that's just contributing to a bad structure. So we actually did go to them and say, this is the cost of a case, and they did pay for it. It's not work we do a lot of now. there's been a huge shift in society, and that is that we're going to the more punitive. In the UK, there used to be 200 community mediation services, and there are a handful now. I think there are two answers to this. One is we need to get back to lobbying local authorities, government, statutory agencies. They need to be lobbied to find budget for this, and we can easily show how it saves money. We can easily show that. But secondly, we also need to bring this work to people, just to people, because, you know, as I say, when I train people in the dialogue roadmap, even if there's no system, no one can stop you having a conversation with somebody. No one can stop a group of people on a housing associate meeting. And so where the work developed for me, and I did take this into New York, I did some work on Long Island, paid for by the district attorney's office. God forbid our Crown Prosecution Service would ever pay for prevention work, is to bring people to healing circles. Because, I mean, no, this takes us way further than I wanted to go today, but there are conversations we need to have in the complex world that we're living in that's creating so much division, about the grief of being human. And so for me, there's something about bringing people together to just be able to talk about that without an authority saying it's okay for us to have these conversations. I did this in one housing estate in South London where we took all the people who had antisocial behaviour issues, who, I mean, interestingly enough, they had an antisocial behaviour panel, but the panel was made up of residents who had problems with their neighbours. So we took all of those people and we trained them to become tenant listeners. And they literally flipped the whole thing around antisocial behaviour into whenever a problem sparks up, we just need to go and listen, find out what the issue is, then bring it to a group and figure out what is the community response. And there's just not enough, you know, everybody's sitting there like this now, you know, and we're splitting people, we're dividing where we need to bring people together. And that's probably as much as I want to say, because there are another couple of hands up, but do get in touch.
Yes, I will. Thanks, Maria. Maybe we need to train politicians to be better at listening. Maybe that would be the start.
The trouble
Thanks
with
so
that,
much.
so the trouble with that is that when you train politicians and certain other people, and I've found this with sex offenders, is that you can actually then train people to be more manipulative, and you have to be very careful. But also that's a whole nother workshop.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, and thanks, Dave.
Thank you. Right.
That last comment was very insightful.
Yes.
Maria. Next person I've got with their hand up is Minglei. Minglei Wu, please.
Thank you. Hi, Maria. And what you presented there is just beautiful. It's really, really inspiring. So this question is more related to what's going to Afsana about the community mediation. To give you background, so I'm cross-border commercial mediation, and my comfort zone is always legal argument, commercial. So as a lot of mediators at the early stage, we were advised go to a community mediations kind of try out, which hindsight, this is so wrong because there's complete different community mediation. So my question related to, you mentioned you did energy healing, whether that actually help you to deal with community mediation problems. So I did a community mediation, and there's one particular case. It took me months and hours and prep the parties to, you know, discovering underlying interest and talk to them and prep them for joint session. And I felt they were ready. They were calm. They really saw their problems, and it's a community. It's a neighbor dispute. But when I brought them together after months of trying and trusting them and thinking they were ready, this is a safe place, they could talk to each other. And literally, the moment they got together and one party took over, and to the point that I have to stop the mediation. And what I saw there was utterly human darkness of allegation, all sorts of words. I think that traumatized me a bit, because you did question yourself, what you have done wrong before, and what kind of things you need to learn from there. It just so I'm wondering, you are what you are now from the 30 years ago it started. The devotion and the determination of all of this, like the dark side human being, and your energy healing work played a very important role there. And the second question is, I wanted to go back, like I want to help community mediation, but I don't want to mess up there as well. I don't want to kind of not really help them. So what sort of advice you would give to commercial mediators, and how we could help, how we could contribute?
Thank you. So I'm going to sort of speed things up a bit, because there's a couple of things I want to say as well. And then after 10 o'clock, I'm happy to stay on for anyone that wants to stay on for a little while. Okay, so the energy work is, for me, in our, where I've come to, is that there are two polarities. One is the logical, rational, and the other is the mystical. And in our world, we've gone far too much towards the logical, rational, and we actually don't allow for the mystical, which is the energy, the spiritual, the vibrations, the frequency. And even where these things have been around, indigenous people knew this stuff. In order to talk about it, we have to call it quantum physics, to be allowed to sort of say these things exist and are real, and people do have experiences. And so the energy work for me is two things. It's about opening intuition, so being able to say that there are things that cannot be proven that we can know, that come from, it's the easy way of describing that is that there's a cloud full of community, or wisdom and knowledge, and you can actually just stick your USB into that and download wisdom and information and knowledge. And secondly, then there is, as I said, vibrating at the frequency of love. That's what the energy work is, and what you bring in the room and how you read the energy. And the second thing you talked about, where you thought they were in the room, I have this allegation of a lot of mediators, that a lot of mediators are people that want to make peace. And being a mediation is not a peaceful process. There's a lot of noise to go through. And so in my process, we make space for that huge, we call it the jackal show, but we make space for that. And we've got certain ways of managing that to bring it down and let people have that outburst. I think the mediation hasn't really happened if what we're doing is suppressing all that stuff that was backed up, that you now created a space in which they can vomit it all out, and we're there to clear up the vomit. So there's something about that. That's probably as far as I can go right now. I know there's a couple of other hands up, and I'm happy I can stay on, and my next meeting's not until 10:30 if anyone wants to stay on and continue the conversation. But I would say, if you're interested, we've just opened up our one year training. It's 20 days of training over a year in a small, tight group that's very intimate, where I take you through this whole process and you become a practitioner that can do more than just mediate.
Okay, Maria, that's great. Dave, we're exactly 10 o'clock. Maria, that's great and really fantastic. I like the analogy between sex offenders and politicians and manipulation. Bear in mind that
I noted that, Michael.
Yeah, bear in mind I live in Cowes in the Isle of Wight. And up the road is two big prisons, one of which at least is full of sex offenders. This is why the Isle of Wight sometimes called the Isle of Perverts, actually. But there we are. Anyway, just very quickly, if you're prepared to stay on for a little while, that would be great. Very quickly, Dave, should we just talk about our next meeting, which I think is now going to be on the 21st of January?
Subject to confirmation, yes.
So we're going truly international because we're going to have a lady called Christine Maqsood and a guy called Dr. Ahmad, who are from the Mediation Hub in the UAE. You can Google it, very easy, mediationhub.ae. We've recently seen them in Dubai Arbitration Week. There's a lot going on with mediation in the region, and we probably have a lot to learn about what they're doing over here. Just very quickly, if you don't mind, Maria, we've got 30, we had 31 new people booked first time, I was going to say offenders, but I meant attenders. And so I'm just going to call and just see if we've got one or two of them here, and they just to say in a sentence what they do and why they're here. So